Hi, my name is John Bibbins, and I will be presenting on George Dawson and his social justice, searching for a forgotten 19th century post-colonial and industrial heritage. The research questions I will be covering are: what is the heritage value of George Dawson? What is the heritage context of the Birmingham being revived? Where does Dawson fit in the context of empire? What should Dawson be revived? The main framework we'll be going over is an introduction to George Dawson, his Birmingham, and Joseph Chamberlain, who was influenced by Dawson. He was later mayor and father to Neville Chamberlain. Then we'll be going to heritage of George Dawson's civic gospel, the main ideas he supported. Then geographies of Birmingham as a heritage site, the international and local levels, difficult heritage of empire and its connection to Dawson, civic gospel as social justice, then monumentality, and finally economics of heritage, the 2022 Commonwealth Games, followed by a conclusion directly answering the questions I have asked. Reverend George Dawson was born in the early 18th or 19th century. He preached a civic or municipal gospel. Dawson, from his sermon, The Communism of Christianity, said, "For the day of holy communism will come, and a library full of the souls of the ancients, for far beyond all the saints that you can paint on the windows are those shelves filled with books of the men of olden times. Over all this is written, free library. O holy words! By and by we shall have free education for all. Some of you may live to see when the schoolhouse is free, so that every child may go in, and education shall be free, like the gospel free to all." Victorian Britain at the time that he is talking about and talking to was essentially a hellish environment of the Industrial Revolution, with no workers' rights, no social welfare, and mass pollution. And so the idea that he really represents is building a Jerusalem. William Blake's words of those dark satanic mills, tearing them down and building a Jerusalem in England's green hills. At the time, Tristram Hunt, or today Tristram Hunt, really encapsulates what building Jerusalem was at the time, with the rise and fall of the Victorian city. He says that the early historians of the Birmingham civic renaissance described how Dawson and Chamberlain worked as a dynamic double act. The preacher infused the minds of the people with municipal reform, while Chamberlain, the cool, calm man of business, yet acute politician, had the guys to see it through. Now, this was not Neville Chamberlain, as most of us know well from his role in World War II. This is his father, Mayor Joseph Chamberlain. Now, Joseph Chamberlain wanted to implement Dawson's vision, to take the municipal gospel from an ideal to a reality. He drank at this kind of well of ideas that Dawson promoted and implemented the civic gospel as municipal socialism. Municipal socialism essentially was taking a lot of these ideas of protecting the water and the gas and energy in general, owning that, and then as they sold it back to their citizenry, used that money to improve the citizenry's lives. The lasting physical heritage of Dawson includes the Birmingham Free Reference Library, which houses the first public Shakespeare library for the people, for everyone to use. And this was revealed in the 1800s, and we accept public libraries and a lot of works, whether it's digitized or in person, as a basic staple of modern life. But this was not the case in the mid-1800s. Most literature was only for the aristocracy or the very highly educated, which was a very small percentage of the population. And a further legacy is all the public works of Chamberlain, which he took Dawson's ideas and created he channeled the profits of gas and the recently municipalized waterworks into improvements into physical and cultural facilities. Later, Chamberlain founded the University of Birmingham and was their chancellor in between a stint in the House of Commons, where Joseph Chamberlain really became a national political figure based on the ideas of George Dawson. The geographies of Birmingham as a local and global heritage site stem from it being within the region of the Midlands, the United Kingdom, Europe, and its proximity to the continent of Europe and the United States. The first three are very obvious. So the West Midlands is heart of the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of the social problems that Dawson and later Joseph Chamberlain tackled were because of the Industrial Revolution that happens in the Midlands. The European connection actually has to deal with these universal values that Dawson tried to argue for. They were really in a spirit of what he called a civic-based patriotism. The civic-based patriotism runs in a way different from the continent, where the continent was about nationalism and liberal nationalism of socialists and anarchists and Marxists, like the Lady Liberty or the Liberty Leading the People picture that I have shown. That was really what was the zeitgeist of the era. And he used that spirit but created a Birmingham nationalism, a Birmingham identity. So that would be like someone saying, I'm a New Yorker today. Like it is really reviving that. And that's what created all these public works which have never existed before, like the public schools and the aqueducts and all these other things that were privy to England at the time. They really saw themselves as a Florentine Republic city. They really invested into a range of Italian Renaissance government infrastructure, like the council and the mayor and so on. The connection to the United States actually stems from an American diplomat's 1869 work, Walks in the Black Country and its Green Borderland, where he coined the term the Black Country, black by day and red by night. And this area is actually connected because of a heritage of ethnicity. A lot of immigrants to Appalachia and the Rust Belt are from the Black Country in Birmingham in England. And while they share the ethnicity together, they also share the work, like the same work that was being done in England eventually attracted people to those parts of the United States. In trying to modernize and bring back George Dawson, one of our central questions is why should we revive him? The Everything to Everybody project at Birmingham really has been pushed out by an article called, or a paper called Lost Prophet by Professor Ewan Fernie of the Shakespeare Institute. And it really says that, it really shows that Dawson, so the city meant something besides the policeman and the scavenger. It had a larger and higher function than to maintain public order and to provide for public health. And this really came in the form of public works, according to Dawson, where a city must have its parks, as well as its prisons, its art gallery, as well as its asylum, its books and its libraries, as well as its baths and washhouses, its schools, as well as its sewers. It must think of beauty and of dignity, no less than of order and of health. His mantra was everything to everybody, and that's what this project with the Birmingham Shakespeare Library is trying to promote. Based on Dawson, he said that it was the time has come to give everything to everybody. The day would come when a man would be ashamed to shut up a picture by Raphael or a statue by any great master in a private house. Gifts of genius are sunshine, open to all, for all, to be reached by all, and ultimately to be understood and enjoyed by all. There is no civic beauty without social welfare, for the simple reason that injustice is unlovely and repellent. There's no social welfare without civic beauty, which betokens and is a spur to the vigor and public estimation of our common life. And in this context, I really believe that Dawson, as does Professor Ewan Fernie, is a tenet of our modern social justice and really would be progressive in today's world, only in this context, based on his everything to everybody mantra. As we will see when he goes to the United States, he actually starts to fall short from this and would not be able to be a figure, or at least his comments in the United States would not be able to survive today in today's world. So in this, the difficult heritage of empire, Pax Britannica, slavery, and George Dawson. George Dawson was considered an antidote by Ewan Fernie to British nationalism, this idea of empire that died in the 1950s and 60s with the end of empire and the rise of the British Commonwealth, where the Queen is still the head of state. However, all most former colonies like Australia and Canada and Jamaica are self-governing entities. Now, Dawson opposed slavery, and he actually visited the United States in the mid-1800s. However, his presence in America and its frontier contributed to the displacement of indigenous culture, and he really represented what is called Pax Britannica. Pax Britannica is the idea of Britain as an economic hegemon, and they created a lasting peace throughout the world until World War I. However, this peace that they secured and the control of global supply chains was based on the cheap labor of the slave trade. And having a figure like Dawson come to America and later say that he supported the education of free slaves, however, he reflected the racist idea that the abolition of slavery may result in African Americans, quote, not being able to take care of themselves. And while he believed in everything to everybody in England and for the English in that context, he then went out into the world that the English were formerly, or the British were formerly civilizing, and said that not all apply or it's not everybody, it's only an English or white everybody. And this is where a lot of great radicals and even in the American context, in the American Revolution, what a great revolution, saying of the rights of man and pursuit of happiness. But again, the undertone, if you read between the lines, it's only for white males in a way that it doesn't allow for other people to actually be a part of humanity or mankind. And I believe one of the key focuses on Birmingham and on Dawson is his original placement after his death. He had a statue built from him in the central main square, Chamberlain Square it's called today, of Birmingham. He died in 1876, and the statue stood until 1951. Its destruction was actually marked by the celebration of empire at the waning years in the early 50s of the British imperial project. And what a fitting way for his demise to be by empire, just as his demise in ability to be really seen as progressive today, if he was in today's world, is on his failures to deal with questions of empire and slavery. It's also fitting that there was a destruction at the time because the style is actually a very traditional English imperialistic style. There's a lot of these type of structures built to kings and queens in the London era that I've personally seen. The structure next to it that still exists today in Chamberlain Square is an embodiment of Englishness. And at the time, when it was built for Dawson, he was a radical, according to the English. And the reason he would be able to revive today is the opposite of fitting into the English identity of the time. And this style that was eventually destroyed never truly reflected what he believed, and fittingly so was dismantled. On the Everything to Everybody site, it states that the project is a major collaboration with Birmingham City Council, which aims to revive the world's first great public Shakespeare library and Birmingham's broader reputation as a pioneering modern city in time for the 2022 Commonwealth Games. This is really where the economics of heritage is shown, that the investment by the Birmingham City Council and the university is based on propping up its culture that it can offer for the Commonwealth Games in just over a year and a half. The Everything to Everybody project is led by the University of Birmingham Shakespeare Institute Professor Ewan Fernie, the one I mentioned earlier with the seminal Lost Prophet article. He states that there's a real need to reinvent Englishness and identity of our shared culture together today. Where better to start with Shakespeare as a kind of repository of the English achievement and the English tradition, but we're not interested in mindless or nostalgic Shakespeare worship. He says that, like the founders of Birmingham Shakespeare Memorial Library, i.e. George Dawson, we want to simulate a new Shakespearean conversation for the present that will rediscover and reinvent English culture and make it fit for purpose and make it exciting, forward-looking phenomenon for today. Another patron is actor Adrian Lester from Day After Tomorrow, and it really shows that a lot of cultural figures of England are helping this project. In conclusion, I believe that Dawson falls short of his pledge of everything to everybody, and this really reflects while his idea was good, his actual personal reality does not live up to that. To answer this what is a heritage value? He was able to translate these ideas of the Bible and Shakespeare to be a basis of a social justice revolution in the 19th century municipal sphere. Now, the heritage context of Birmingham is Dawson's Birmingham represents an industrial center that is reminiscent of coal country USA and the Rust Belt, places with similar need of cultural and economic heritage revivals to support their own development, something that means this project is not just an English or European project of everything to everybody, but something that can be taken to the United States as well. Where does Dawson fit in the context of empire? His legacy is tarnished by his comments on African Americans. While many of his ideas would be considered progressive today, he does not hold up to the everything to everybody standard he fought for. And should it be revived? George Dawson's legacy was misrepresented before to fit into an age of empire. Only social justice ideas like everything to everybody would be able to coincide with the zeitgeist of movements like the Black Lives Matter and other grand movements of our social justice age. Well, I thank you all for listening to my presentation, and here are my references and images slides. Thank you. Have a good day.